Hey, what's going on YouTube? So I tried to obviously just condense the AMD Computex coverage for you guys. It was about a 45-minute, maybe an hour long, something like that, presentation from them, and there was a lot of ums and a lot of the things that I do on stage during that press conference, and it just lulled a little bit, between presentations and demos and information, etc. So just wanted to get that to you guys that don't want to sit around and watch an hour-long press conference that's meant obviously for the press to sit there and write down notes and then deliver it, via different forms of the media, basically the internet and YouTube videos like this. But anyway, they'll probably made me pull it down inevitably because YouTube just has insane copyright restrictions, and I'm sure whether it's ROG trying to get me to pull that video of the laptop down, or AMD or whatever, it'll probably come down pretty quickly. But it's up there if you guys want to see it really quick. It's just a quick, rundown of what they showed at Computex, and I just want to talk about that stuff real quick. A couple of things that I saw that I really thought were cool was, the very slim, kind of like Dell XPS 13 form factor, the super, I think you said it was like a sub 15 millimeter, like an Ultrabook that had, basically Vega graphics cores, probably a Raven Ridge APU in it, Zen CPU cores, 4 cores, 8 threads. I mentioned those in the prior video. Those should be, low TDP power consumption parts that fit into form factors like that may or may not even require active cooling. Very good, thermals, so very low heat output, and really good low power consumption, so long battery life, but also a really robust chip with integrated, Vega GPU cores, as well as a quad-core 8-thread Ryzen CPU. Should be awesome. Right now I have a friend that has a brand new Dell XPS 13. It's an Intel, 7 series. I think it's a Core i7, but it's a dual core, quad thread CPU with Intel graphics on it, and with an SSD it does scoot around applications, internet, word processing, stuff like that just fine. But it's just not really the same thing as having a quad core 8-thread Vega CPU with Vega GPU cores. Should be freaking awesome for those ultra compact Ultrabooks. I can't wait to get my hands on one of those. You saw a few OEM products from companies like Dell, with kind of going after the gaming market that wants to just go out and buy a retail box. You saw some other products from ROG, Republic of Gamers, Acer, laptops that may or may not include up to 8 cores. Ryzen CPUs with 16 threads is just nuts in a laptop. That'll really allow for people that are on the road to do things like game streaming, productivity, content creation work on their laptop, which is a huge, boon to that industry. Previously a lot of these guys would go out to these shows, they'd shoot in these, 4K resolution videos on these crazy cameras, get all this footage, had to take it all home before they could actually produce their videos. And now, if you've got an 8-core, 16-thread CPU at your disposal on the road, you can just sit there in your hotel room if you're doing coverage on one of these shows and do your content creation right there in your hotel room, or even there on the showroom floor. So that's outstanding. Can't wait for those to come to market here very soon. They also did mention, and I think I cut it out actually of that kind of condensed version of that video, that even coming to market here really soon are going to be the Ryzen R3 processors for their mainstream, AM4 socket platform. Those will all be Oculus certified, VR ready to go, which, as you guys know, the Core i3s are not. They're just dual core CPUs. So that's really cool. They're going to have, even the low end consumer CPUs from AMD are going to be VR ready, which is awesome. Also, you guys did see, of course, they showed some stuff, just kind of performance and numbers, stuff that they've done with the launch of Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7, kind of the value proposition there. is just excellent in terms of what they're offering to consumers, not only today but in terms of longevity of that socket. They showed the new platform, ThreadRipper, Ryzen ThreadRipper, which is just basically, it's like I said last week, it's basically two CCX modules, two of those 4-core CCX modules that you find in the R5 and the R7 Ryzen mainstream CPUs. Is now kind of combined together into what they're calling a Zeppelin. And those are going to be 8 CPU core modules, 16 megabytes of L3 cache. And they're going to put 2 of those into these ThreadRipper CPUs. So up to 16 cores, 32 threads, 64 PCIe 3.0 lanes. And you did see in that, if you want to watch that, it's a quick video. They also show a demo of them putting 4 Radeon Vega GPUs with obviously, the full allotment of PCIe lanes, 16 PCIe lanes apiece, which is, you don't have to make any kind of concession there in terms of your PCIe bandwidth if you're going to run 4 cards. And a lot of those workstation customers will wind up doing that, or at least running 2 or 3 of those. But that'll allow a great mix of multiple GPUs for rendering power, which you can see again in that video. They do some quick product demos of a 16-core, 32-thread Ryzen ThreadRipper CPU paired with 4 Vega GPUs doing like real-time rendering, and it just looks super fast and awesome for people doing content creation and 3D modeling and stuff like that. So. That's really cool. They did not mention, and I thought that they would. Well, I kind of thought they would. I kind of thought they wouldn't mention. ThreadRipper CPUs with more than 16 cores. Now, Intel announced their newest 18-core behemoth that's going to fit into their socket 2066 coming out here. X299 chipset. I believe it comes out sometime late June or early July. We'll start to see those CPUs and motherboards come to market. And ThreadRipper, I think, will probably come out maybe a few weeks after you see those high-end desktop platform, the new high-end desktop platform from Intel come out. And I think price performance, Intel has done a good job. You can already see. Intel is going to start to lower the prices and give consumers more cores and more threads for the money in those Skylake X parts on socket 2066 on that platform. So that's good news for everybody. They both companies have kind of optimized their cache pipelines. Like the L1, L2, L3 cache. The allotments and allocation in terms of memory amount, like Intel's got this new thing with Skylake X, so they put 1 megabyte of L2 cache per core. Not quite as much L3 cache as what's found, on the AMD side, but they should be very competitive in terms of IPC and performance, and even in clock speeds. I know a lot of you guys probably are going to other sites right now, cruising the internet and looking up and seeing these product lineups, and you're seeing like, the 10 and 12 and 14, 16, 18 core Skylake X CPUs that say, hey, we've got a boost clock of like 4.5 gigahertz. This looks amazing. Well, there's a couple of things to consider here. One is that just in reality, we got to keep in reality here. You're not going to get a 16 core, or an 18 core, or a 12 core, or a 10 core CPU to run maybe a 10 core, but you're starting to push thermals a lot. You're going to have a lot of heat output, and a lot of juice going through those CPUs, going to create a lot of heat. You're not going to be able to run all 16 or 18 cores at 4.5 gigahertz. It's just not going to happen. So you're going to see, I would say, pretty similar base frequency clock speeds between the ThreadRipper CPUs and Skylake X parts, especially in similar core counts. Each of those is going to have like their turbo and their boost mode. Intel and AMD, I think right now you're probably going to see 4 gigahertz, right around there, maybe 4.1 gigahertz. I think some of the Intel chips have said 4.3 gigahertz, something like that, for their regular boost clock. AMD has not shown on any of their slides, at least I haven't seen any of the slides from like WCCF Tech or anybody else show, the additional little nudge you're going to get from XFR, which usually is like between 50 and 100 megahertz additional, depending on how much thermal headroom that you have. But that's only usually on, I think, one CPU core and the Ryzen CPUs. So it may be on 2 CPU cores in ThreadRipper, because basically it's 2 of those kind of just crammed together on the same die. On the Intel side of things, you have this new thing called TurboMax 3.0, and that basically just picks out like the fastest single CPU core and lets that single core, if thermals are able to take care of the heat, it'll let that CPU core boost up to a maximum of like 4.5 gigahertz, which is awesome. It's going to be great for anything that's single threaded, but you got to understand, I think it's going to be variable. I don't think that every 7980XE or whatever. The XE is hilarious, by the way. It stands for extreme. Like, like an extreme and then an extreme with the E. Just in case the X with the extreme on the rest of the lineup wasn't enough extreme for you, they're going to go extreme. For $2,000, it better be extreme. But it's going to be an awesome CPU. 18 cores, 36 threads, should be an absolute monster. And even if you're only getting 4.5 gigahertz or thereabouts on a single thread, or 2 threads, that's going to be a phenomenal CPU. So keep in mind though that those CPUs and that platform are going to have a considerable deficit to what AMD is offering and their high-end desktop platform as far as PCIe lanes, so I/O, to and from the CPU. And a lot of those customers that are spending $2,000 on a CPU, $600 on a motherboard, they are the type of customers that want to put, multiple NVMe, M.2, PCIe Express, solid state drives in their systems. They want to put in multiple graphics cards. So those PCIe lanes are really at a premium. And that could be something that differentiates, AMD's platform. Just as, Optane support, I really don't see that being a factor. Again, because availability just sucks. And really, it's kind of an intermediary memory there between, RAM and what's available right now with NAND technology. I don't see it being a very big impact or a differentiator, but it's something that Intel can put on their marketing material and say, hey, we have 3D XPoint, support for our high-end desktop platform. One thing I did think was kind of cheesy of Intel, and I know I'm getting off topic here, and I'm going about Intel on my post AMD Computex video, but I got to get it out. I got my girlfriend coming over, so deal with it. It's going to be in one video. I'll do another video later on with some more stuff in it, but I thought that when Intel came out and said we're going to support 3 generations of CPUs on our new socket 2066. I think I call it socket P. Is what they're calling. Oh no, I'm sorry. Socket P is going to be their new server socket. Socket R4 is their high-end desktop. Socket 2066. That's a 2066 Pen LGA socket for X299 and Skylake X, Kaby Lake X CPUs at launch. They're like, we're going to support 3 generations of CPUs on this platform. Well, 2 of them I just named, and those are the ones it's going to launch with. You got your 2 Kaby Lake X SKUs, which basically are just a 7600K and a 7700K that are less power efficient and will get you onto that platform, albeit with only 28 PCI Express lanes. Then you've got your Skylake X CPUs ranging from 6 cores up to 18, which is awesome. But those have only got 44 PCIe Express well, PCIe, 3.0 lanes compared to the, ThreadRipper platform has 64. And, like I say, that's going to be kind of a differentiator there. But Intel mentioned that they're going to, like I say, support 3 generations of CPUs on that platform, and 2 of them are announced with the platform. The third is going to be Cannon Lake, and as far as I know, Cannon Lake is really just going to be like a re-release, basically, of Skylake X with some different memory support. It may support Optane, 3D XPoint technology in like a DIMM form factor, kind of like your RAM fits in right now. And again, the viability and the timeline on that is really up in the air right now. But I know I mentioned to you guys before, I think in a previous video, maybe I deleted it. A lot of the stuff I record and just toss out the window because it's 5 minutes later it's irrelevant because something else came up in the news. But 3D XPoint technology right now is only being produced in a 2-layer process where you've got NAND being produced by everyone and their mother in at least 64 layers. SK Hynix is doing it now in 72 layers, so you just get a lot more data density. It's a lot less in terms of cost of production for NAND, even though there are some latency benefits to 3D XPoint versus NAND. It's still not as low as what you're going to have on your RAM, your system RAM. So it's kind of in a weird space and really only relevant in the server market, in my opinion. But I just thought it was kind of cheesy that Intel would say, hey, we're going to support 3 generations of CPUs on this new platform, so you guys can count on us to for long-term upgrade paths, just like AMD, because with AMD, socket AM4 for the mainstream, socket SP3R2, which has some other name, but that's the socket they're going to use with their X399 chipset. For the high-end desktop, it's going to accommodate these ThreadRipper Whitehaven CPUs, and that both those sockets, as well as their upcoming SP3 server socket, and more than likely whatever socket they choose to use for mobile, I don't know what that socket name is, but they're all going to support future iterations of AMD CPUs that utilize Zen 2, Zen 3, generation CPUs. So CPUs that have greater efficiency, greater IPC, are going to include the ones that do include integrated graphics are going to include newer and newer versions of that technology as well, so moving from Vega to to Navi and beyond. So that's phenomenal. Getting back to the ThreadRipper stuff, the AMD, I was surprised they didn't mention chips above 16 cores, 32 threads, even though Intel had just announced their 18-core part maybe a few hours before Computex. Maybe AMD didn't have anything ready. They didn't want to say anything. But keep in mind that it is possible. Socket SP3 can accommodate chips today if they wanted to, with up to 32 cores and 64 threads. It's the exact same 4094 pin socket as SP3, as their server socket that's going to accommodate their new EPYC CPUs in the server space. So if they wanted to, you may have seen in that video the guy held up the CPU, and it's a big CPU. I saw Linus did a video where he actually got a hold of one of the new Asus ROG motherboards for that socket, opened it up, and if they wanted to, it's a big socket. They could put 4 Zeppelin modules in there, and today, put out a CPU that's got up to 32 cores and 64 threads. And I know this because I've looked over the spec sheets, and then you can do the same. It's public information. If you want to go and check it out, type in, Naples CPUs, and you will see that the very highest end Naples CPU, which again is 32 cores, 64 threads, fits into that SP3 socket, which is again The SP3R2 socket for the high-end desktop is the exact same physical socket with a little bit less power availability. The power availability on socket SP3 is like 200 watts plus, and the socket SP3R2 power availability is like 180 plus. Now I don't know what that plus means, what the available, what the leeway is there over and above 180 or 200 watts on either platform. But as I was saying, the highest end, 32 core, 64 thread Naples CPU, I think utilizes 180 watts. So, if they felt like it, they could drop a 32 core, 64 thread CPU, or any of the bend down variants, that may have manufacturing defects, where they have to disable, one core per Zeppelin, giving you, let's see, a 28 core part, which would be, absolutely bonkers in a high-end desktop platform. They could do a 24 core part or a 20 core part just as easily. So, keep that in mind. They didn't mention any of that stuff, but there's certainly room there in terms of power availability in that SP3R2 socket in the high-end desktop space on this new, platform, Ryzen ThreadRipper. And at least at launch, we're going to see 16 cores, 32 threads, 64 PCIe, express lanes. Should be an absolute whale of a platform. And again, you've got Intel saying they're going to support 3 generations of CPUs on socket 2066. Well, 2 of those are coming out with the platform, and both of those have already been out on other platforms. Kaby Lake and Skylake, have already been out in other platforms. They have reworked the cache, like I say, in Skylake X, and they've minimized the L3 cache and kind of boosted the L2 cache, which I think should have good results. But the architectures themselves are no different than they were a year ago. And Canyon Lake, like I say, is just going to be another re-release of Skylake with some different memory, interface options, as far as I know. Now, then you've got AMD, and they're going to support your at least 16 cores, 32 threads, Zen Generation 1 cores out of the gate, 64 PCIe lanes, with the possibility of way more cores in the very near future, and the known fact of being able to put Zen 2 generation core CPUs in there, Zen 3 generation core CPUs in there that utilize 7 nanometer manufacturing fabrication processes and consume less power and are far more efficient with better IPC and more cores and threads. So anyway, I can't speak for the future of what Intel will do, beyond what they've said, and they said they're going to support those 3 generations on that socket. But it's clear to me that AMD intends to stick by these new sockets for a long time, and they've got some great technology in the market today on AM4 with a lot of legs in the future. I see the same thing happening for them in the mobile space, high-end desktop space, and even in the server space. So anyway, guys, hope you found this stuff enjoyable. If you have any comments, questions, hate mail you want to give me down below, if you want to just, give me some emojis or something like that with the bird, or some thumbs up or thumbs down, whatever the case may be. It's all good. Leave them down below. I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Hope you have a phenomenal day or night. Peace out. Catch you guys in the next one.